Le'ed kol zman ve'et kol chefetz tachat hashamayim. In the words of Ecclesiastes in Hebrew Scripture, there's a season for everything, a time for every experience under heaven. Eit laledet ve'et lamut, a time to be born and a time to die. Eit lata'at ve'et lakor natua, a time to plant and a time to uproot that which is planted. Eit lifrotz ve'et livnot, a time to tear down and a time to build up. Eit livkot ve'et lischok, a time to cry and a time to laugh. Eit sophod, and there is a time to mourn. We mourn together as family and as friends the passing of Anna Spitz, Chaya bat Michael Vesara, who passed away early this recent Saturday morning. We extend condolences to her family as we both honor Anna's life and comfort those who mourn. Her daughter Susan, husband Michael, with their daughters Julie and Debbie, and their grandchildren Lily, Hannah, and Ileana, to Monica and her children David and Eva, to Walter and his children Allison and Jonathan, to her son Michael, to her daughter Cindy and her husband AJ, and her grandchildren Sarah and Mitchell. Anna, her Hebrew name was Chaya. Chaya in Hebrew means one who is alive. And indeed, what was distinctive about Anna, who was my aunt, is her ability to value life in all its details. It also is a name that's connected to her as a survivor, one who overcame many obstacles to survive. She was born February 10th, 1929, in a small village, a Russian-speaking village in the Carpathian Mountains of Czechoslovakia, an area where borders would constantly be changing. She was only 6 years old when her mother, Sarah, passed away. With her father, Michael, and an older sister by 2 years, Lillian. Her father, Michael, would remarry, and Anna's stepmother would have 3 small children when in 1944, in the spring, the family was deported from Carpathia to Auschwitz. Anna was only 15 years old as she stood next to her sister, Lily, pinching her cheek so that she would look red, robust, healthy, so she would be selected, Chaya, to survive. She did survive in Auschwitz and then in what was later to be called the Death March at the end of the war to the extermination camp of Bergen-Belsen, where she would be liberated. But she would be liberated sickly with TB and be taken to Sweden, where she would be for 4 years, along with her sister Lily, recovering her health. And then the 2 sisters came to the United States in 1949, invited by their mother Sarah's brother Nathan Jacobovitz as their sponsor to New Jersey. In that light, I call on Michael Hennenberg to come forward, and Robert Weitzner, who is Lily's son, along with his brother Mark Weitzman, to read a selection from Isaiah. Use the mic.
A voice says, "Cry out," and I say, "What shall I cry?" All flesh is grass, and all its beauty is like the flower of the field. The grass withers, the flowers fades, when a wind of the Lord blows upon it. Surely the people are grass. The grass withers, the flowers fades, but the word of our God shall endure forever.
Anna came to America in 1949 and got a job in a bakery where she began to regain her weight and her strength. And in the Bronx, Harry Spitz, who had come a couple years earlier to America, had a small grocery store, and he had a customer who he liked. Her name was Gittel, and he said, "Where can I get a woman like you?" She said, "I have a cousin," and that cousin was Anna. And they met in 1952, and among Walter's papers was a poem that Harry wrote to Anna before they were married. I will read the beginning of the poem. It spells out, "To my Anna." And I'll read at this time how Harry wrote a poem of love with the "to my." Thinking of you day and night makes my life easy and bright. I ever see you smiling face, which I wish to kiss always. Oh, how nice it could be, our life, you with me, like two birds on the tree, living together happily. Marvelous little home that we can call our own means a rich paradise and you in it. Queen, so nice. You, inspiring my ambition to make possible all your wishes. Enjoying the comfort of this life, all this I want for my dear wife. On Friday nights, there is a selection traditionally sang at the family table that describes a model wife, Proverbs chapter 31. I invite to join me for the reading of this Monica Linderman, Eva Linderman, and Jonathan Spitz. I'll read it in Hebrew, and then the three of you, as Anna's daughter and grandchildren, extol her as a wife. First in Hebrew. Eshet chayil me yimtza v'rachok mipni michra, batach balev bala v'shala lo yachsar, gamala tu tova lo ra kol yemei chayeha, kapar parsa la'ani v'yadeha shucha le'evyon, Oz v'hadar levusha v'tischak li yom acharon. Piha patcha b'chachma v'torat chesed al lashona. Sophia halichot beta v'lechem atzlut lo tochel. Kamu v'neha v'yashruha bala v'alala. Rabot banota suchayel v'at atlit al kulana. Sheker hachen v'hevel hayofi. Ashrei yirat Adonai titalal. Utna la mi priyadeha, v'halaluha, v'sh'ari ma'aseha.
A good wife who can find? Her worth is far above rubies. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and nothing shall he lack. She renders him good and not evil all the days of her life.
She opens her hand to the needy and extends her hand to the poor. She is robed in strength and dignity and cheerfully faces whatever may come. She opens her mouth with wisdom. Her tongue is guided by kindness.
She tends to the affairs of her household and eats not the bread of idleness. Her children come forward and bless her. her husband too, and he praises her. Many women have done superbly, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a God-revering woman is much to be praised. Place before her the fruit of her hands. Wherever people gather, her deeds speak her praise.
Anna and Harry were married in 1953. In 1954, 1955, and 1956, Anna gave birth to her first 3 of her 5 children. I invite her eldest, Susan Hennenberg.
Thank you all for coming. I know that many of you came from a long distance. My cousin Robert came from New Jersey to be here. Leah, you came from California to be here. Obviously, my husband and I. But there are many of you in this room who were very close to my mother and knew my mother for many years, long before she got Alzheimer's, and I appreciate all of you being here. One of the things that Ellie said to us when we talked last night was, you know, we want to remember her as a whole person and throughout her whole life. And the last 10 years were very hard for all of us. She did live a long life, and I keep trying to remember that, but she's my mother. I love her more than anything. I'll miss her more than anything. I've had so many years to prepare for this because she got Alzheimer's when she was 80. And yet, sometimes it seems like I've had no time at all to prepare because I loved her so much, and so many things I wanted to say. I've written so many speeches. I've thought of them in my head. I've written them down. I threw them away. I keep starting again. I don't even know what to say. Alzheimer's is an insidious, horrible disease, and I slowly lost my mother and my best friend and my most ardent supporter in life that I've ever had. And it's been a slow 10 years of that. My mother was there for me, always. She was there for all of her children. She was there for all of her grandchildren. I spoke to my mother continuously throughout the decades that I lived in Cleveland. I missed her when I wasn't with her, and I'd constantly call her just to talk and hear her voice. She always made me feel better when I felt down or was worried about something. She could talk to me and I would feel better. She also was there for all of my joys and all of my happiness that I've had, and they were all her joys and her happiness. And she felt, she just wanted to give me love, and she did her whole life. She was the most positive, upbeat person, and I think all of you in this room know, I mean, even when she was at Silverado, we've got a couple members here from Silverado. Thank you for coming. You know, she was always thankful. She was always appreciative. She was always loving and kind. And that was my mother throughout her whole life. She appreciated everything everybody ever did. and everything that people said. There wasn't a kinder, more gentler person on this earth. And we were the lucky recipients of that. After I had children, I deadly missed her even more and would fly to Phoenix with all of my kids at least 2 to 3 times a year. I spent weeks at a time living on Linger Lane. I coerced her into going with us on various vacations so I could be with her. I was so happy to have my 2 daughters and my mother and me all together. And we traveled alone, the 4 of us, many times, to California, to New York. Michael and I also took her to Florida and to Colorado. I took her to Washington, D.C. I took her everywhere I could think of so that we could spend time together and I could see her happy. She so enjoyed every moment that she was with us and loved seeing the ocean and the mountains and especially the White House. I think that was her favorite. I loved showing her everything, and more than anything, I loved making her happy. That's what I always wanted to do. I knew how hard her life had been, and I just wanted her to be happy. She suffered more than any person should have to suffer. As Ellie said, she lost her mother when she was a very small child. She was only 6 years old. She physically watched as her stepmother and her step-siblings walked into the gas chamber at Auschwitz. And at the age of 15, when she went in, she also lost her father when he, too, was burned to death in the crematorium. She almost died from TB when she was liberated in Bergen-Belsen. She was barely alive when they found her. And then she wound up moving to a strange country. And if you can imagine, she had to learn a whole new language. She had to learn new customs. She had to grow up without any family except her sister, thank God. She didn't have a childhood. And although I was her oldest daughter, in some ways, I was also her friend and her advisor, because she would ask me about what she should do and how she should do things. She didn't have that childhood growing up. Even though the last 10 years were very difficult for all of us, and she couldn't remember much, she would always tell me when I left that I should never forget how much she loved me. I can hear her right now, and even when I was here to visit in March, and at that point everything was taken from her. She couldn't walk the way she used to. She was in a wheelchair. She couldn't go to the bathroom on her own. She needed help. She was alone and lost in her mind. But her very last words to me, when I said I was going back to Cleveland, was, "Don't ever forget how much I love you." And I love you, Mom, and I'll never forget. And I know that my siblings and my children and my nieces and nephews feel the same way. Thank you. Thank you.
Susie, then Monica, then Walter, gap of 7 years, and then in quick succession, Michael and Cindy. Each of you had a mother who allowed each of you to feel beloved. Each of you had your own distinctive relationship with her as well. I now invite Cindy to share a eulogy for her mother, too.
Thank you all so much for coming. It really means a lot to me. And I know it meant a lot to my mom, all of you. Anna Spitz was a friend, a wife, a mother, and a great-grandmother to us. She was my mother, and she was a Holocaust survivor, a survivor that went on to have 5 kids, 8 grandkids, and 4 great-grandkids. Her strength, kindness, graciousness, and love will live on in me, my brothers and sisters, our children, and our children's children. Her legacy will live on forever. As the youngest child of her 5 kids, if I was going to describe my mom in 2 words, it would be protector and teacher. First and foremost, she was my protector. My mother always made me feel safe, secure, loved, and cared for. To this day, when I am feeling lonely or sad, I still wish I could crawl into bed with my mom and feel her close to me. I long for those days where she would tell me that everything was going to be all right and make me feel safe. She always gave me that feeling of security. It is hard to describe, but she always made me feel like nothing bad could happen. I was invincible with her around. A feeling of safety and security that only my mom could give me. I remember as a kid, I would run into my parents' room and jump in bed with my mom when I had a nightmare or couldn't sleep. She would cuddle with me and tell me it was going to be all right. She was always there for me. Thank you, Mom. I will never forget the time I woke up in the middle of the night and felt like I was going to die. I was about 14 years old, and I remember staying up the night before nervous for the first day of high school. I remember not realizing what was going on, but knew I needed to wake my mom up to help me. My mom knew right away what to do. I remember her feeling my forehead and gasping. Then she took my temperature. It was 104 degrees. I remember asking my mom that night if I was going to die. She looked at me and laughed nervously and said, "No, you're not going to die." Although I could tell she was nervous, she didn't want to show it. She proceeded to rub me down with a cold washcloth and rubbing alcohol. She made sure my fever was going down and proceeded to check on me throughout the night. I honestly feel I would have died that night if not for her utmost love and care. Thank you, Mom. My mom was also my first teacher. She taught me the real meaning of kindness, love, and empathy for others. I will never forget the time we were eating dinner at a Bob's Big Boy restaurant. I was probably about 7 or 8 years old at the time. My eyes were always bigger than my stomach, and I always ordered more food than I could eat. This one particular time, I remember my parents ordering for my brother and I. When the food came, I saw the small dry hamburger in front of me, and then I saw my dad's hamburger. I saw my dad's hamburger. It was big and juicy, and it looked wonderful. I remember telling my mom and dad that I didn't want my hamburger, but I wanted my dad's hamburger. The good person my dad was, he gave me his hamburger, and he ate my small hamburger. He didn't say a word about it. My mother told me it was too much food for me, but in order to prove her wrong, I forced myself to eat every bite of it. As I sat there sick to my stomach after overeating, my mom took me aside and said, "That was your dad's food, and he didn't have enough to eat." She told me that I can't always just think about myself and what I want, but I need to think about other people's needs too. That night, I learned to take the focus off me all the time and to focus on the needs of others. Thank you, Mom. I'm a better person and a better mom because of you. You were and will always be my protector and my teacher. I know my kids are better people because of you. My daughter is a caregiver for developmentally disabled kids. It's a tough job where she sometimes gets bit and has her hair pulled, but she loves it. She was also your caregiver in your last final months here on earth. She describes the moment as the most rewarding and fulfilling experience in her life. My son's first school award was for kindness. His teachers are always telling me how thoughtful and kind of a person he is. This is because of you, Mom. And I know my future grandkids will be better people because of you as well. Mom, you will not be forgotten. I love you.
Eight grandchildren, eulogies from two of them representing that cluster of eight. First, Allison Musser.
For the last 5 years, our family watched Grandma's own memories fade, and it was incredibly difficult for all of us. While she seemed different from how we knew her to be, it is the vivid memories we have of her that comfort us. Last night, when we met with Ellie, we sat around the table, and we reminisced and celebrated Grandma Anna as we knew her to be. We talked about her life story and her endearing habits. Our memories made us laugh and cry. What we know is that Grandma loved her family very much, and last night I was so moved to see how much her family loves her. My memories of my grandma will include shell noodles in her soup and Velveeta macaroni, our trips to Christown for back-to-school shopping, and the same Chinese buffet every single summer. And her sincerity. Honest, she would always say after every compliment she would give you. Growing up in the Jewish community, you learn about the Holocaust to remember our heritage. As a kid, I remember feeling, and I still do, feeling so incredibly proud and honored to share my grandmother's survival story. Her strength, her love, and her spirit will live on in the stories we remember with each other and the memories we will share as our family grows. Grandma Anna, we love you, and we know you are finally home with Grandpa.
Granddaughter Julie Cronenberg tried to get a last-minute ticket from Cleveland and couldn't succeed in getting here, but she did send some words that her mom, Susie, will share.
Before I read what my daughter wrote, I do want to reiterate what Ellie said, is both my kids tried desperately to get here, especially Julie. She was extremely close to my mother, and it was so hard with all the many flights were booked solid, and my daughter has called me several times last night and this morning, and even while we were in the room with Rabbi Ellie, and she called last night. We had her on the phone on speaker so she could be part of all of this, and she called just as we were walking in to the mortuary here again, just to make sure I was okay. She wrote this morning, and I also neglected to say, and I really want to say this now, thank you, Ellie, so very, very much from the bottom of all of our hearts for you also coming from California and getting here to do this for my mother. I know that she would appreciate it if she was here, and she's looking down and she's very thankful. And Jonathan also, of course, you came from Seattle, so it's hard sometimes to get where you want to be. But my kids loved my mother very, very much. And I'm going to now, without any changes, read what my daughter wrote and her oldest granddaughter. Wow, I love it. This is for me? Those are the phrases I often hear from my 4-year-old daughter, Hannah. In her enthusiasm for life and gratitude, I see my grandma, Anna Spitz. Grandma's joy and love and generosity shone through in every minute of her life, especially when receiving visitors or small gifts or hearing about a loved one's accomplishments. And I know that joy and love will continue to shine on in Hannah, my daughter, and my other daughter, Lily, and many of us here today. Her positive attitude is a testament to what we can overcome. When I was 6 years old, I had a tantrum at the kitchen table from my other grandmother because Grandma, who was visiting Cleveland from Phoenix, had taken just a little bit too much of my other grandmother's homemade cranberry sauce, and I was worried as a 6-year-old that there wouldn't be enough left to eat with my chicken cutlet that Omi made. As I whined and shrieked, Grandma began to cry, and my mother quickly escorted me from the table to explain privately that I was being rude and selfish, but also to emphasize that my words were particularly hurtful to Grandma, who, when she was a teenager, had been imprisoned and suffered from near starvation. That was the first time I learned about the Holocaust. While Grandma definitely would not have wanted any of us to dwell on the horrors of the Holocaust, she would have wanted her family history and experiences with the many people who helped her during and after the war to be remembered and taught to our children. In her 1989 testimony preserved on the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum's website, she repeatedly says with enthusiasm, "Thank you for asking," after the interviewer poses a question to her. The story of my grandmother's survival is not simply a harrowing tale of a girl who beat the odds. It's the story of a woman who fought for me to exist. But without Grandma, how will we teach the critical lessons to be learned from life? Conveying her suffering is pointless if it is not joined with a rigorous understanding of what led to the Holocaust and the sobering lesson that it is each of our responsibility to stop the next Holocaust. The Holocaust and World War II generally were the product of various preconditions: a worldwide economic depression, German grievances following World War I, a fear of communist Russia. But the overriding cause of such bloodshed and horror was the fact that hate found a home in the leadership of one of the most advanced countries on earth. That leader was elected without a majority of the vote and used the common trick of blaming a nation's problem on some of its most vulnerable inhabitants, and used technology and propaganda to further his visions and spread his message far and wide. And all the while, otherwise good men and women downplayed the dangers posed by such rhetoric until it was too late. They didn't have the blazing example of the Holocaust to show them the end result of unfettered scapegoating and bullying and discrimination as we do. The most important lesson from Grandma's life is that by learning about her life and teaching it to our children, we learn to preserve the future for the next generation. Like Grandma, her husband, Harry Spitz, also did not dwell on the atrocities of the Holocaust, but he gave video testimony also that has been preserved for us to watch today. In the tearful closing remarks of his USC Shoah Foundation interview, Grandpa instructed his grandchildren to be good citizens, to get an education, to be an example of kindness to all different people, no matter their race, their color, or religion, so that there never may be hatred again in this world. It is my hope that today and always that I honor grandma's and grandpa's lives by learning about their lives and teaching about their lives, and by being a living testament to their strength, their positivity, and their kindness. Thank you.
I asked you, her children, with grandchildren present, if Anna could speak now, what would she want to say? And you were unanimous, because they were words that you had heard repeatedly, words that you heard at the end of a phone call or leaving her room in recent years. When you would depart, she would look toward you and say, "Don't forget, I love you." For Anna, that's how she lived her life. She lived her life to serve. I asked Michael this morning, when you bring your mom to mind, where do you see her? And you said, Michael, I see her in the kitchen offering lemon tea. As you've all shared, to come, and as I know as her nephew, to come into your family home was to have your mom say, "Sit down," pointing to the kitchen table, and then to say, "What would you like?" Knowing as she opened the door that whatever there was to be shared. Her joy was in taking care of her family and whoever was in her presence. But she didn't do it from weakness, she did it from strength. To be a young person and survive as she did is to be dispositionally, remarkably strong within. A quality of inner strength that translated to her to a quality of gentleness. You might mistake it for weakness, but it was not weakness. It was an ability to celebrate life and to know that to share, to give, was to harvest life. I hear her high-pitched voice, as you also shared, saying, "Wow." Childlike in a certain way. An ability to go someplace or hear a story and to be wowed, to say, "Amazing." And that quality of wow was to make whoever was telling the story or whoever she was watching perform at a school play feel so valuable, so precious to her, and more, so valuable and precious to life. Chaya, the one whose name meant life. Kindness defined her. That's the description that was part of the model woman of Eshet Chayil that you read toward the beginning of the service. Eshet Chayil Miyimsa, a woman of strength, a woman of valor, is precious and hard to find. Her worth is far above rubies. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and nothing shall he lack. Every night, Anna got down on her hands and knees at her initiative to clean her kitchen floor. Because for her, her home was her responsibility, and making sure that for her husband, for her family, everything was in place was paramount. And that was true throughout her life. Even after her husband died, she continued to clean in that remarkably serving way. She renders him good and not evil all the days of her life. Her husband, Harry, passed away 10 years ago. It almost coincides with the onset of her Alzheimer's. Harry worked hard to provide for her. In that poem that he wrote even before they were married, he said, "You will allow me to be ambitious." And ambitious he was, and successful he was. Security he provided her. And with the years in which she had needs, those needs were provided for financially. And she always provided. She opens her hand to the needy and extends her hand to the poor. She is robed in strength and dignity and cheerfully faces whatever may come. As you described her, she was always positive. With the horror she expressed and experienced in her youth, it did not make her cynical. It did not make her negative. If anything, it accentuated her willingness to find the good in life. She opens her mouth with wisdom. Her tongue is guided by kindness. The word, Walter, that you used to describe your mom was kind. She never spoke ill of others. It wasn't part of who she was. In her very core, she was kind. Even struggling in these last years, as you shared with me, the caregivers, some of you are here from Silverado, commented how she, Anna, would say thank you. Because being kind and appreciative was not just second nature, it was a defining quality. She tends to the affairs of her household. She eats not the bread of idleness. She always tended. She was a walker, never idle. One of the reasons she was so healthy is because she did and liked long walks. When her husband Harry was in a residence well over a mile on Dunlap and 3rd Street, she would walk every day across Phoenix, regardless of the weather. Idleness was not her way. Her children and grandchildren come forward and bless her. Many women have done superbly, but you, quote, surpass them all. For charm is deceitful and beauty is vanishing. But a woman of dignity, of integrity, that woman is to be praised. Place before her the fruit of her hands. Wherever people gather, her deeds speak her praise. And so to pull this together, you, her children, and you, her grandchildren, and you who parent her great-grandchildren, you are her living monuments. And with her passing, you now become ancestors. Ancestors with a responsibility to hold on not just to her suffering in the Holocaust, but the pride and joy and grounding she took with Jewish belonging, and to celebrate that dimension that gave her a sense of place also in the world. To celebrate that quality of service that affirmed Chaya, that life is for living, to be celebrated in giving, and to be able to say to each other, as you hear her voice speaking to you, don't forget, I love you. Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the universe, Anna Spitz was blessed to live a full life, 90 years, with a man who loved her, and together to raise 5 remarkable, individual, strong children, parents of remarkable grandchildren, who she, Chaya, took such delight in, and in the sons-in-laws and daughters-in-law. May her memory be a blessing to each of you. May her love permeate your lives. Amen. I invite you to stand for a closing prayer of tribute to Anna Spitz, Chaya bat Michael v'Sara. El malei rachamim, shochen b'amromim. Hamitzei menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashchina, b'malot kedoshim utuharim, kezaha harakia mashirim et nishmat Chaya, bat Michael v'Sara, שהלך לעולמו, בגן עדן תהא מנוחתו. אנא ברא לך ממסתיריה בסדק הנפך לעולמים, הוא צרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה. אדוני הוא נחלתה וינוח בשלום על משכבה, ונאמר Amen. O God, exalted and full of compassion, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Anna Spitz, Chaya, who has gone to her eternal home. Master of mercy, we beseech you, remember all the worthy, righteous, and kindnesses that she performed in the land of the living. May her soul be bound up in the eternal bond of life, for the Lord is her portion, and may she rest in peace. And in tribute we say, Amen. You may be seated. I want to invite the funeral director, Jonathan Perlman, forward, and he'll guide us, but I do want to acknowledge the pallbearers in that there will be 6 pallbearers and then 3 honorary pallbearers. The pallbearers will be Michael Hennenberg, David Linderman, Jonathan Spitz, Mitchell Moss, Robert Reitzner, and A.J. Moss. The honorary pallbearers, Ryan Musser, Bill Linderman, and Matt Murray, who will walk immediately behind the casket.